and welcome to Millennium Memories. Have you ever wondered what those big brown gates are hiding between the UK and Canada and Epcot? Or have you wandered up to the blue tent that's sometimes available behind them and thought, what's actually inside this? What about humming along to the music as you're walking out of Epcot after illuminations? That catchy tune with the ticking clocks, where did that come from? And why were there those huge stone lumps outside the front of Spaceship Earth as you walk into Epcot? Well, all of these things were part of Disney's Millennium Celebration, and as part of the legacy of the celebration, these things have remained in the parks, although most guests are oblivious to their original intent and meaning. So what this video is going to do is explore the magic of Disney's Millennium Celebration, to explain the origins of some of these things, and to go into a bit more depth about the Millennium Celebration that took place in Walt Disney World. Walt Disney World's Millennium Celebration was a 15-month celebration. It started on the 1st of October 1999 and it ran all the way through to the 1st of January 2001. This is a total of 459 days of celebration of the dawn of the new millennium. The theme of the celebration was Celebrate the Future Hand in Hand, which is one of the reasons why Epcot was picked as the focal point of the celebration, as opposed to the Magic Kingdom, which was the usual home for anniversaries and celebrations. The idea of the celebration was that moving forward into the new millennium, the world would move into a place of peace, friendship and hope. All of those things that are embodied by the World Showcase. With all of these countries side by side, the Millennium took it one step further and looked at the promise of the future of the new millennium. As part of the celebration, there was new decorations, there was a new fireworks display, there was a parade, and there was even a dedicated Millennium Village pavilion. We're going to look at each of those in turn to help you understand how the Millennium Celebration hung together in Epcot. The first thing that you'll probably know about the Millennium Celebration was that there was a giant wand with a Mickey hand over the top of Spaceship Earth. This is either a love it or hate it thing. The wand was Mickey's hand from Fantasia with a star on top, sprinkling pixie dust on top of Spaceship Earth with 2000 across the top of Spaceship Earth. Now, as with a lot of things in the Millennium Celebration, this wand was due to stay for the duration of the Millennium Celebration and then be deconstructed. What actually happened was that Walt Disney World adapted and changed the 2000 to Epcot, and the wand actually endured for several years afterwards. The wand itself was 116 feet tall, and Mickey's hand holding the wand was 8 stories high. There are 150 stars on top of Spaceship Earth, and it took 6 months before the celebration to construct the entire thing. This was the guests' first experience of the Millennium Magic as they entered Epcot. The wand could be seen from the monorail and from the roads and the parking lot surrounding Epcot, so it was a way of welcoming guests into the Millennium Celebration. The next thing that guests would come across as they entered Epcot was what was known as Leave a Legacy. Those are the big giant pillars, slabs, lumps, whatever you want to call them, that were situated in the front of Spaceship Earth after you'd gone through the turnstiles but before you'd passed underneath Spaceship Earth. These granite monoliths ranged from 3 to 19 feet tall, and mounted on them were stone plates which were etched with the images of guests that had visited during the Millennium Celebration. Now, a lot of the monoliths weren't actually filled, but they did have the potential to take 750,000 etched images on those giant monoliths. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, they weren't as popular as Disney had expected, and a lot of those stones remained unfilled. These endured all the way through to 2019 when Disney started removing them as part of the reimagining of Epcot for the start of 2020. To get an image onto the Leave a Legacy, all you had to do was go up to one of the Leave a Legacy booths, have your photograph taken, fill in some paperwork, and, of course, pay. It costs $35 for a picture with one person in it, or $38 for a picture with 2 people, and each of the images were etched onto a square that was 1 inch by 1 inch. Within a couple of hours, guests would be able to see their images on a temporary display near Spaceship Earth. Within a week, your image could be on a etched plate which was mounted onto one of the monoliths. Guests were mailed out a certificate and they were told the location of their image on the monoliths, which was found using coordinates. So something like W2D3 would tell you which monolith, which side of Spaceship Earth, and then you would be able to find your image for years to come, or you could send your friends and family to go and find you if you wanted. Now, a lot of people thought that these big stone slabs were a bit of an eyesore, but the fact that they endured for 19 years goes to show that actually they did have a place within the Millennium Celebration, and they were important to Epcot as part of leaving a legacy. It meant that guests for years to come could return and see their photographs from the Millennium. Children who had their pictures taken returned 15 years later as adults with their own children to see where they had had their picture taken during the Millennium Celebration. It was indeed a place to leave a legacy. Now, everyone is familiar with pin trading, I think pretty much now. It's a fairly established thing that happens in the parks, and it happens in the parks worldwide as well. But a lot of people probably don't know that pin trading actually started as part of the Millennium Celebration. Pins had been available in Walt Disney World for a period of time prior to the Millennium Celebration, but pin trading was something that was set up as actually part of the Millennium Celebration. There were official points, one of which was in the plaza behind Spaceship Earth, where the pin trading station stayed for 20 years after the celebration. Another one was outside the front of the Millennium Village, and guests were encouraged to trade pins with each other and with cast members. If somebody had a pin that you wanted and you had one that you were willing to give away, then you could trade pins. It was a way of changing and expanding your collection whilst also getting interaction with cast members from around the world and also other guests. As part of the Millennium Celebration, Walt Disney World did release a new pin on every day of the Millennium Celebration. So that's 459 Millennium Celebration pins that were released throughout the Millennium Celebration. One of the big features of the Millennium Celebration was Tapestry of Nations. Now, this was actually a parade at Epcot, so it's quite unusual in the first instance because normally we would associate parades with Magic Kingdom. There was in fact a parade at Epcot for the Millennium Celebration. Tapestry of Nations happened twice a night, the first time at sunset and the second time after dark. And there were 27-foot torches all the way around the lagoon which would light the way for the procession. The procession is led in start by the Sage of Time, and his face is like the sun because it was recognised that all cultures will recognise the sun. The parade featured dancing puppets, drummers, music and light. The idea is that they represent the nations of the world dancing together as time passes. Following behind the Sage of Time, there were 120 puppets ranging from 12 to 17 feet tall. There were 8 different types of puppets. There was Aztec Man, Angel Girl, Bird Man, Disc Man, Hammered Man, Inverted Marionette, Sprite and Wiggle Girl. And these puppets danced their way through the World Showcase promenade, engaging with guests as they went. Throughout the parade, the puppets were broken up by the 15 Millennium clocks. These featured 30 drummers and were the only live set pieces as part of the parade, and they represent the passage of time, both past and present. These drummers were the ones that beat the heartbeat of the parade as it moved around the lagoon. The parade itself was a massive parade because World Showcase Lagoon is very long. It is just under 1.5 miles all the way around. And the parade itself actually took 3 years to develop, which is the longest it had taken to develop any Disney parade at that point in Disney history. Tapestry of Nations is a really important focal point for the Millennium Celebration because it united guests around the World Showcase It celebrated the passage of time, the promise of a new millennium, and represented cultures together celebrating the millennium and coming togetherness, celebrating the future hand in hand, as was the theme of the millennium. It also brings us back to, what is the music with the ticking clocks that you hear when you walk out of Epcot after Illuminations? That is actually the Tapestry of Nations soundtrack. And even though the parade finished with the end of the Millennium Celebration, the music was still played every night that Illuminations was shown, up until 2019 when they actually had the final performance of Illuminations. So, although you may not have seen Tapestry of Nations parade, you're probably very familiar with the music if you've ever walked out of Epcot late at night after the fireworks. In terms of fireworks, Epcot had fireworks in the past. They'd had fireworks called Illuminations, but the version that was created for the Millennium Celebration was Illuminations Reflections of Earth. These fireworks are what Imagineers call a play in 4 acts. It basically celebrates the evolution of our planet, of the arrival of human life on the Earth, our triumphs, our celebrations, and then the promise for the new millennium. The fireworks feature a massive spinning globe which shows over 300 images around the LED screens during the fireworks celebration. It is a 28-foot globe which is sailed out on a 350-ton barge into the middle of the lagoon. At the end of the fireworks, the globe opens up to welcome in the new millennium, and a torch arises out of the open globe. This torch ascends 38 feet into the air at the finale. The story that is told during the fireworks starts off with an introduction. The grandfatherly figure narrates at the beginning a little message of storytelling throughout the generations. It celebrates the oral history that we as human beings share. Gathered around the lagoon by the torches of fire, the narrator introduces the fireworks.
We're gathered here tonight around the fire, as people of all lands have gathered for thousands and thousands of years before us.
The flames are then extinguished, leaving guests in the darkness, waiting for the start of the celebration. The celebrations start with one single shooting star firing up into the sky over the World Showcase Lagoon. This then starts the first act of the fireworks, which is known as Chaos. This very first section is chaotic. There's flame, there's lasers. It represents the creation of our planet, the chaos of the heat and the fire and the lava that actually formed the planet. Gradually though, we are left with the second phase of the fireworks. Chaos leads into order, and with order we start to see the evolution of life on our planet. We see plants, we see animals, birds, flowers. There's a green, peaceful, much more serene feeling to this section of the fireworks as it celebrates the evolution of our planet. Finally, we get to the end, meaning, man's greatest accomplishments, things that we need to celebrate, the unity of humans as one people on planet Earth, celebrations of mankind, the promise of the future. The globe slowly opens up and welcomes in the new millennium, which is nothing but hope and promise for a peaceful and prosperous future. So, if you've ever watched Illuminations and wondered what on earth it was all about, is there actually a story? Do any of these fireworks actually mean anything? There you go. It is a 4-part story with 3 parts being told by the fireworks display itself that basically map out the history of planet Earth, of human beings as a race, from the very start of the creation of our planet with the Big Bang, right the way through to welcoming in the new millennium in 2000. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, the focal point of the Millennium Celebration in Epcot was Millennium Village. This was a 60,000 square foot temporary pavilion that was built between the UK and Canada on the right-hand side of World Showcase Lagoon. This was a temporary structure which was due to be in place for the 15 months of the celebration. The entire construction of the building, other than the kitchens, which is a permanent building out the back, is a temporary structure which was designed just to be there for a short period of time. Millennium Village was designed to represent peace, optimism, triumph and hope. It was a world without borders. Whereas you would walk round World Showcase and very clearly transition from one country to another, the Millennium Village Pavilion had all nations together under one roof without borders between each of these countries. It demonstrated a united world, nations working side by side regardless of cultural or religious barriers or conflicts. Everyone was working together. The theme of Millennium Village was gifts to the world. There were over 300 cast members working inside the Millennium Village Pavilion, representing over 65 different countries from around the world, and they were there to showcase their gifts to the world, to teach guests about the countries they had come from, their cultures, their traditions, their way of life, in order to share those gifts with guests visiting Walt Disney World. As guests entered the Millennium Village Pavilion, they would start off in, as with many Walt Disney World attractions, a pre-show. And this pre-show started with 8 separate nations explaining and celebrating their gifts to the world, sharing them with guests who were gathered in the pre-show area.
We are here to celebrate the traditions of every nation. It's from traditions that are one of the rich tapestry of world culture. These gifts are our legacy.
India. Namaste. Millennium Village में आप सबका स्वागत है. We celebrate our differences as we share different cultures. We learn to respect the richness, the diversity adds to our world. These gifts enrich us.
India. Jambo, esa es la caribbean of India. We celebrate the children of the world. Their laughter is a musical night, and their gifts bring us down.
New Zealand.
We celebrate the explorers, the brave men and women who are courageously sought to expand our horizons and our knowledge. Their gifts challenge us.
Indonesia. Selamat siang. We celebrate the artists of the world by sharing their imagination and talents. They add beauty and mystery to our life. Their gift inspires us.
South Africa.
We celebrate the thinkers, men and women who share their ideas to help both nations, philosophies, and beliefs. Their gifts inspire us.
Israel.
Hello, Brooklyn, Bahrain, and happy Poli. We celebrate those who preserve our past, so they effort to build a nation for the future. They give guidance.
Nigeria.
Okay, we celebrate each of you. Your dreams, your efforts, and your accomplishments will become our destiny. So please help us celebrate the future hand in hand.
Celebrate!
Celebrate.
Celebrate!
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 Celebrate.
Celebrate!
Celebrate the future.
Hand in hand!
Come with me on a journey into Disney's Millennium Village Pavilion.
Their gifts enlighten us.
The pre-show exhibit also included display screens where you could unlock gifts to the world. This was sponsored by the United Nations and the World Bank. Moving through into the exhibit, we start with Scotland, which celebrated inventors. Through miniature golf, you were able to play a game of golf and discover different science and technology which was developed in Scotland, from penicillin to fibre optics. You also got to learn a little bit about Scotland through the poetry of Robert Burns. The Brazilian celebration was to celebrate the 500th year of the discovery of Brazil, and it took you through there was a walkthrough where you could walk through the Amazon rainforest and hear the sounds of Brazil through the rainforest, and also through the diversity of carnival. There was an interactive game which allowed you to take part in a football, soccer game, and also to steer a boat through the Amazon rainforest. The game was played using a series of interactive paddles with green on one side and yellow on the other side, which told the computer which way to move the items on the screen. In Saudi Arabia, the celebration focused on the hospitality of the Saudi people. There were several different parts to the spirit of Saudi Arabia. You were able to taste traditional coffee plus dates. You were able to take part in a magic carpet ride, which was a little game that involved a series of pulleys and ropes which would move the magic carpet. This magic carpet took you through a century of Saudi progress. It was known as Rise of the Kingdom. And you could also look at a family scrapbook which would show the similarities between Saudi and the United States. The Swedish exhibit featured 4 big eggs. They are actually part of the Swedish exhibit in the 1998 Expo in Lisbon, but they were so popular they were transferred to Millennium Village for the Swedish exhibit. They featured a different season in each egg, so spring, summer, autumn and winter, featuring a real-life snowman. These eggs were also known as biodomes. Now in here was freezing, and this was real ice. The food court was made up of 8 kiosks: Europe, Asia, Pacific Rim, South America, North America, Africa, Middle East. Eritrea, being a small country, had a small corner of Millennium Village where guests could take part in a traditional coffee ceremony. This was a really popular exhibit, and there was often a wait for people wanting to line up and try the coffee. Opposite the food court was a folk art exhibit which had different Coca-Cola bottles which were created by different artists from around the world. So they were all different shapes and sizes, different designs, and they stood just opposite the food court. In Israel, starting with Journey to Jerusalem, you then got to walk through a narrow lane representing the ancient city, and this took you through into an attraction which was essentially like a magic carpet ride through 3,000 years of history. This was a sort of simulator ride which took you through Jerusalem, and then at the end you got to Inspired by Israel, which looked at some of the innovative technology used for green energy. In the store there was different merchandise from different countries, as well as millennium related merchandise. In Chile, although it was a small exhibition, they had information about their culture, their wine, the mountains, and the reason that it's a small narrow exhibit is because it is a small narrow country. They also had a Maui, which was a representation of the stone monuments which sit on Easter Island. The Village Green was mainly focused on renewability. There were various games and activities that you could take part in which showed different ways in which we could produce renewable energy for things like cars, furniture, housing, all through the different way that things can be grown on farms, with the particular focus on stuff that could be recycled and reused to then help regrow the following year's crops. The Village Green then led through to what was commonly known as the Artisans, the world marketplace, where artisans from different countries sat and created various pieces which guests could actually buy there and then in the village. Countries represented in this area were Lebanon, Peru, Thailand, Egypt, Greece, South Korea, and Venezuela.
Is only for words and art. How could a bicycle transport a community to better health and better lives? Millions of people around the world lack access to basic healthcare.
The World Culture Game was a chance for guests to demonstrate the things that they had learnt as they had walked through Millennium Village. The Restrooms, which was one of the most popular attractions within the village. At the time they were built, they were the largest restrooms on property in Walt Disney World. I'm sure that's probably been surpassed in the last 20 years, but they were very big, mirroring Disney's expectations for the guest flow through the exhibit. Like a lot of other elements of the Millennium Celebration, the building has remained in situ. There have been some big brown gates which have been erected in front of it and are normally closed to the public. Occasionally they will do Character Palooza cast member training where they'll open the gates and have characters available for people to meet. And the building has been gutted of all the Millennium exhibits and is now used as a convention hall or an exhibition space. It's usually used for ticketed events. My 2010 cast member reunion was held inside, and this year, because of the COVID and social distancing restrictions, it has been open to the general guest population to allow for extra spacing for food and wine stalls. And during the redevelopment of the restrooms next to Canada, the restrooms were open to the public for extra facilities. The planned United Kingdom attraction looked like it was going to sit on top of where the building is currently situated. However, now those plans have been put on hold. Potentially the building has been given a longer lease. Whether it survives for a long time, who knows, but hopefully it will remain for some time. I hope that you have found this video interesting, useful, Even if it's just answered some of those questions around what those things are and why they are, why you can hear certain things or see certain things when you're within Epcot. Hopefully I've now answered those questions for you, and hopefully you've learned a little bit about the magic of the Millennium that was celebrated at Walt Disney World. Of course, if you have any questions, please do ask them in the comments below this video. Otherwise, celebrate the future hand in hand. Why am I so passionate about this? Well, for just under a year, from September 1999, I was a Millennium Village opening team ambassador.